Are you recording us?
Oh, gosh.
Really?
Yeah.
Can we skip the recording today?
I will not post it. I will send it on a private link. I will not post it. First of all, I really appreciate everybody taking this seriously. Before we begin, Julianne is observing today Yahrzeit for, I got the correct name, by the way, Shmuel Yosef ben Yoel. Your father, right? So the Neshama should have an aliyah. So it's appropriate that our learning today should be in his honor and his memory. And I think what a great way to give tribute on the Yahrzeit. I will offer you the opportunity to go first then.
Okay.
Amazing.
Hey, Julie. Okay, here goes. Okay. So this is from Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. He helped me out a bit from the Boca Raton Synagogue. And he said that it's clear from many sources that the purpose of the evening of the Seder is not to just read through the text, which I think we all know. So the entire format of the Seder supports the goal of the evening, which is simply to have lots of conversation. Rav Chaim Soloveitchik suggests that this format is what differentiates mitzvah to speak about the Yetzias Mitzrayim on the Seder night from the mitzvah to remember it every single day. On Seder night, we have a conversation about the experience in the form of questions and answers, give and take, and dialogue about the discussion. Many of the strange practices of the night are done just for this reason, so children can be curious and ask, why are they doing certain funny things? So again, it's not to ramble through the text or to compete for who has the most say. The entire format of the Seder supports the goal of the evening, which is simply to have a conversation. And also, at the very end, it's an exercise in Emunah. So we should all feel Hashem in our lives and have a deeper connection and closeness to him. So how to have some of these questions, Rabbi Goldberg suggests that you start with, let's say, halach ma'anya. Why do we begin this Seder? Specifically by inviting the underprivileged to join us. Is there a connection between freedom and sharing with others? Avadim hayinu, what's slavery and what's freedom? Though we're physically free, are we really slaves in our present day lives, such as to social media? There are a few examples that he gives, but these are just a couple that I chose. The 4 sons, which child do you identify with? Is the Rasha really so wicked if he at least comes to the Seder? And what about the hypothetical 5th son who doesn't even show? Are the ones who don't even know how to ask, the unaffiliated of our generation? And how do we engage them? Dayenu, what does it mean to have capacity to say enough? Are we ever satisfied or do we always crave more? And Hallel, what do you look for? And tell your personal stories of freedom and liberation. And at the end, you just want to make sure to have the kind of Seder that leaves your friends not only happy to come back for your food and company, but also for the incredible conversations, hopefully. And that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We were in college. We'd have to do this. Okay. Wow. Excellent job. I know Rabbi Goldberg quite well. He's a friend and a colleague. Excellent job. And when I speak to him, I'm going to tell him that you benefited from his Torah. So.
Just by coincidence, because I just started listening to Behind the Bima and I enjoyed them on that podcast. And then I was just looking around a little bit and his popped up and then I saw that it was his writing. So I thought, well, that makes sense that I chose his.
They did an episode with Mark Wilf.
I a little bit.
Good. Yeah. So it was really, really good. Okay, great job. We're off to a great start. I'm so happy. You see, give me such nachas. I feel like a proud parent. All right, who wants to go next?
I do.
Yay, all right. Look at that.
Need to get it over with. Okay. Kol dichvin yetev yechol, kol ditzrich yetev yifsach. All who are hungry, let them come and eat. All who are needy, let them come and celebrate the Passover with us. So I went with Rabbi Riskin to start, mostly. So aren't the hungry also needy? So hunger can mean not just physical hunger, but hunger for company. people who are lonely. Needy can also be people who are spiritually needy, maybe the confused, or people who are off the derech. And the Seder provides food for both our bodies and our souls. I was looking in a bunch of different places. Art Scroll asks, why are we inviting at this point? Because, clearly our Seder has already started. So maybe we are addressing the guests who are already at our table. So the hungry could be people who starve themselves all day to be hungry for the Seder. Also, and the needy could be the people that are just at the Seder because they need to be at the Seder for the mitzvah of the Seder, but they're not really hungry. The Malbim suggests that we're talking to poor people who we did already invited to our table. I like this one a lot, that we already invited the poor people to our table and they're sitting at the table, but now we want to make this declaration so that they truly feel comfortable sitting at our table because they know we really want them there, because all who are hungry and needy should come join with us. Again, he talks about physical and spiritual sustenance. And I guess this year with COVID, I guess a lot of us are probably feeling spiritually needy and hungry, and also maybe spiritually, or maybe hungry and needy for just something normal. I mean, we always say, this is just me, we always say, why is this night different from all the other nights? But this night different from all the other nights happens every year. So it's something that's more normal for us. So I think it's a good thing that we have this during COVID, the Seder, which is actually, I think I'm hungry and needy for something normal during COVID, so.
Well done. All right. All right, I like that. By the way, if you have Rabbi Riskin's Haggadah, which has been out of print for some time, look at the part that he writes on the 4 sons. It's a phenomenal piece, which I've shared over the years, but he compares that to, and it's from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. He may quote it from someone else, but it's out there. I don't mean out there like outer space. I mean, it's around, that he compares that to the 4 generations that came over from Europe. The Chacham is the generation that came from Europe, and they held to their customs, and they got a new job every Sunday because they didn't want to keep Shabbos. They didn't want to break Shabbos. And then the next generation who rejected it, they came to the Golden Medina, and they rejected all tradition, all of Judaism. But I hope is anybody saying this? I hope not, because I'm not stealing it. And then he says that's the Russia, because they rebelled against all the traditional European Judaism. And then the Tam is confused because he has a parent that rejects everything and a grandparent who's super frum. So they're just kind of like neutral, like, I don't know what to make of this. And then the 4th generation who never met the great grandfather and only saw an ambivalent father and a rebellious grandfather, and they don't even know what to ask or how to ask. Our job is to bring that again full circle. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal piece, because that's the issue of kind of the struggles we have with our children often comes up at the Seder. And as Julianne said about, the 4 sons, like, which son are you? Which child are you? That's always a favorite. I'm sure people kind of like, where would I fit in, or even would I fit in? So this is really, really great stuff. I'm taking my own notes here. This is good. So if I'm going to have to be quoting you or stealing from you, that's going to be helpful. Thank you. All right. Who wants to go next? Chedva. Okay, Vivian. I'm going to unmute you. I have to unmute you. Hold on. Yeah, you have to unmute. It's not going to work if you don't unmute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. All right. So this actually was taught to me by my daughter, Racheli, who attended Tiferet several years ago. And this is based on the teachings of 2 of her teachers, Rabbi Sherman and Mrs. Schneider, and 2 people that I actually sat in classes with. So anyhow, so throughout the Seder, we are faced with many dualities. I'll just mention 3 of them quickly, starting with Matzah, We eat matzah at the Seder because it is lechem oni and because it didn't have time to rise. On one hand, matzah represents slavery because it is poor man's bread. But on the other hand, it represents redemption because as we were being freed, it didn't have time to rise. Red wine, on one hand, represents the blood of the Jewish people. But on the other hand, it represents royalty because that's what kings drink. And salt water represents tears, but it also reminds us of Hashem splitting the Yam Suf, which was Hashem's miracle. So why do all these tangible things at the Seder contradict each other? It is because excitement fades. We're supposed to feel like we just left Mitzrayim, and we're supposed to feel the miracle that was done for us. But it's hard for us to relate to that because it was so long ago. So the Torah tells us to surround ourselves with symbols that are on both ends of the spectrum, from slavery to freedom, so that we are able to feel that we are going through the transition. On the night of the Seder, we have to go through the transition intellectually. We start off low with questions, and we end off high where we have the answers. Rav Pincus says that it doesn't matter how much you know about the story of Pesach. On the night of the Seder, everyone has to go into the story and retell the story. And why is that? Because the Seder isn't changing, but we are. Every year we tell the same story and it gets repetitive, but throughout the year we develop and we evolve. So as our realities change, we experience the Seder differently. And this year's Seder is hopefully different than last year's in a good way. And this past year has changed all of us. And so we have to bring our new selves to the Seder each year.
All right.
That's it.
And that's not even from one of Merit's books on the table. That's pretty good.
It's better.
Well, let me just interject and say, I hope that you will share this with your people at your Seder. You know, especially this year, because this year, everybody's going to be well rested. Nobody, because there's nothing you could do on Erev Pesach, Shabbos. You could rest. And, as it so happens, you're so like busy patching this, that, checking the soup, whatever, that you miss the Seder. But right. No, this year we can't. So you have to contribute, and it's a great. These are really fantastic. This is really, really good stuff. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go. Finish this also.
Yeah.
Okay, so I chose to speak about why do we say Arami Oved at the Seder? So the simple answer is it's short. It describes slavery to freedom. That's it. But if we look at the context from which it is taken, there are other things hinted at that we can learn, teachings about gratitude and of Israel. The text in the Haggadah is taken from Devarim when the farmer came to the Beit HaMikdash with his first fruits and made this formal declaration of thanks. But the piece is not taken in full. The Haggadah includes only Psukim Hey to Chet, but it omits a few that come right before and right after the portion in the Haggadah, which can help explain why this text was chosen. Though you do also have to wonder, why didn't they include them? But I'll get to that later. First, let's look at what we gain by including them. So in Pasuk Gimel, it says, Higadati Hayom Hashem. The farmer says this when he brings the stuff. So you see the word Haggadah already there, the same root as like Higadati Bincha. Rav Soloveitchik says, he goes back to the Targum Yerushalmi, that the word lahagid already suggests giving praise or gratitude. I'm not really sure how he makes that jump, though who am I to question, the Targum and Soloveitchik, but even without that, we'll see that the idea of gratitude comes further on as well. In the Pasuk Yud, we have, one second, I'm just scrolling here. You have I'll just do it in English. You have the farmer saying, where I now bring the first fruits of the soil, which you, O Lord, have given me. You shall leave it before the Lord your God and bow low before the Lord. So we see the farmer thanking God. So if we keep the full context in mind, and let's also remember that we've been taught that everybody knew this paragraph by heart because of the first fruits. So if we keep the context in mind, it's not just a concise retelling of our history, but it's also an expression of thanks for the many blessings that God has given us. So maybe that's one reason they chose this paragraph. Rav Soloveitchik brings up another reason to highlight the land of Israel. in Pasuk Tesha, it says that God brought us to this place, to Israel, to the land of milk and honey. The point of the Exodus wasn't just to leave Egypt, but that we were going to the Holy Land. So he says this piece was chosen so we would immediately associate the Exodus with the gift of the land, the gift of Israel. As to why the Haggadah doesn't include these, if they wanted us to think about them, there are two possibilities that I could think of. One is maybe they thought this was just sufficient. They knew that everybody knew the paragraph. They knew they would on their own remember the ideas of gratitude, remember the ideas of Israel, and it didn't have to be written down. The other possibility is that maybe the rabbis wrote the Haggadah, they wanted to just be really focused on Seder night, on the story of slavery and how we were freed. They had a point they wanted to make about persecution, salvation, about divine redemption, and they purposely chose to stay in a more narrow focus. There's a lot written about this paragraph that I'm not going to do, but there's one more thing I read. Also, this is from Rav Kook, which I just thought was really worth thinking about. I'd like to add that. In Mishnah Bikurim, it says that the people who could read from the portion in the Torah actually did so, but those who couldn't had someone read it for them. However, over the course of time, less learned people stopped coming to the Beit HaMikdash, maybe because they were embarrassed. So the sages decreed that everyone should have the verse read for them. Rav Kook points out that this detracted from the mitzvah, from those who could read. But we learn from this that sometimes, for the greater need of the community, one has to sacrifice from his own spirituality so that everyone can feel included.
Amazing, amazing. I'll just comment that the Targum that you referred to, because when it says that when you come to the Kohen and you relate the story, Higadati, Haggadah, it says Odinan is the word in the Targum, which means to give thanks. The Chizkuni says, Modeh ani lefonecha ki bati el haaretz kamo shenishba ve'amad be'emunato. I'm giving thanks. It's almost like we say, Lahagid baboker chastecha ve'emunatcha baleilot. That in the morning I have to say your kindnesses, and at night I have to talk about my faith. But that's the connection between.
There's a kind of in between word in between them.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, you know what? How do you give thanks? Giving thanks is by the real giving thanks is actually saying it. All right, so you can never say thank you too many times. You have to actually verbalize it. It's like just like vidui, which is confession, has to be verbalized. Thanksgiving also has to be verbalized, and that's a wonderful theme about the Pesach Seder really being Jewish Thanksgiving, just with different types of food, and takes longer to get to it. But other than that, that's really great. And by the way, one of the greatest possessions that I have, Shelly gave me once a couple of years ago, a Haggadah or from the kibbutz.
I didn't give that to you.
You didn't know those? I thought it was, or maybe Barbara
From
gave.
Barbara?
Yeah,
Barbara.
It's phenomenal. It's like
I know it's
very, very different than what I don't think anybody's using that for the Dvar Torah. All right, who's up next?
Okay.
Take it away, whoever, just hop on.
Okay. So I'm kind of working off a little bit of a theme that we've been using in your shiurs, which is like Rabbi Foreman, but this is not from Rabbi Foreman. A little bit of comparison of texts in two different places in the Tanakh and what is the similarity teaching us. So we, in Shemot and the Exodus, we learn about matzah, that we eat matzah, but it's not the first time in the Torah where we have matzah, and the first time is with Lot eats matzah with the Malachim in Stom before Yetziat Stom. So there are a number of words that are used similarly, both in Shemot Yud Bet and in Bereshit it's Yud Tet. First of all, the concept of a Yetziah, that like we just had Purim and we stayed in Galut. There was no Yetziah, but in Mitzrayim and in Stom, there was a Yetziah. And not only was there an Exodus, but there was also the concept that the people that were left behind were decimated, that the nation that was left behind was decimated. Both with Yetziat Mitzrayim and with Lot, there's this concept of being at the Petach HaBayit, the mezuzah, and Lot kind of lingers in the front of his house, watching what the people do outside. there's the idea of being trapped in your home, and if you go out, then you put yourself at risk. With Lud, it's from the people, and in Mitzrayim, it's the Makapachorot. The word hitna mea appears in both places, which is a very uncommon word, and somehow it appears in both of those places. And in Lud, there's even the concept of a makkah, and it hits everyone. And in Mitzrayim, we see that it also hits everyone. So, of course, the question is, why are there all of these similarities? And I got this from Rabbanit Zina Freudlich, who's also a seminary person, and I can actually forward the shiur if anyone is interested. It was really excellent, and I'm not doing it justice in a few minutes. It was quite lengthy. So Lud is with Abraham, and it's the beginning of turning Am Yisrael into a nation, and Yetziat Mitzrayim is the finality of turning Israel into a nation. And the reason, perhaps, that she suggests why these two should be analogous is Abraham might have thought, he was supposed to be a great nation, but he didn't even have any children. So he might have thought that Lud was going to be really the father of the nations, which in a sense he was. There were nations brought of him, but not the nation, not Am Yisrael. His nations were brought out of incest and didn't come out quite the way Am Yisrael came out. So what makes us the chosen people is perhaps the difference between Avram and his righteousness and Lud. And I think the big midot of Avraham are maybe Tzedek, Mishpat, and Lud had the potential, but then he just missed the mark, separated from Avraham, went to a plentiful land that's even compared to Mitzrayim. And Avraham took it all the way, and we need to learn kind of to be the antithesis of Stum and Lud, and that's what makes us Am Yisrael.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's amazing.
Beautiful.
Well done.
I highly recommend the shiur if anyone is interested. I'm happy to forward the link.
I hope so. We're actually, we're sending out, the shuls are sending to the membership, we're sending care packages for Pesach. Again, we're trying to keep everybody connected. So in the care package, everybody's going to receive one of three possible Haggadahs. One is from Rabbi Blech, one is from Erica Brown, and one is from Rabbi Sachs, Zichron Livracha. I'll tell you, if you have anyone, it's a good idea to trade. I'm going to write in there, trade it with someone who doesn't have it, or give it to someone who could benefit from it, pay it forward. But in Rabbi Sachs's Haggadah, in the way that some of these works, Erica's also, they have a half and half, the half is the Haggadah and half are essays. There's an essay on page 125. Rachel, I see you have it. Look on page 125. There's an essay called The First Pesach. And that's exactly the point. This is exactly what he talks about, the first time and the connection, how this is a precursor for and what we have to learn from it. So really a great point. And I love that you take our mode of study and apply it to your Dvar Torah. It gives me I have such nachas. It's okay, I my work is done here. Okay, I'll see what I can do. Okay, who's up next? Well done, Aline.
I will go, if that's okay.
Please.
So I didn't analyze other rabbis or interpretations. I took the leap that I'll force myself to actually think about it and be introspective and use my own interpretation. So I'm sorry that I will sound much less sophisticated and intelligent, but this is a Gail spin on what resonated with me. So I'm fascinated just by why holidays are called certain things. So the word Pesach, if you divide it in half, the first part, peh, is mouth, and set is to speak. And so why do we observe Pesach? Because freedom really comes from the ability to speak. And why do we have to constantly recall it? And in Kiddush, and every time we think about it, everything centers on Pesach, is because as Jewish people, we have an obligation, is how I view it, to constantly speak and to be proactive in the way we live our lives. So then I went through the Haggadah and looked for it every time we saw the word Pesach to see if I could kind of make that work. So we all talked about halach ma'anya, and if you look at it, that's the first time we see the word Pesach. And it requires us to invite people. It's not enough to have a Seder of people that are already going to be there. We have to take actual verbal action to include other people and to proactively have them join our Seder. So that's number one. The second time we see the word Pesach is in the words of the Chacham, of the Chacham child. And if you look at it, it talks about the Korban, the sacrifice. So Pesach there is the Korban Pesach. And speaking sometimes puts you at personal sacrifice. Sometimes when we choose to speak or we have to speak, it comes at personal risk. And we take a sacrifice stepping into a situation where we may have personal consequences that are negative, but we have a
She freeze?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she froze. All
It's
right.
the number one fear people have is public speaking, in case you might freeze. She'll come back. She'll come back.
Hi.
I wish I should have like some hold music.
the Korban, there is a requirement that you have to include other people in your consumption of the Korban. You can't just have it yourself. It's a hoke, but it comes with an obligation that other people need to be involved. And again, predicated on using your voice to include other people to be part of your fulfillment of that hook. And then the last time we see the word Pesach is in Nirtzah at the ending, when it says you've now been privileged to arrange the Seder, you performed it, but it's not just an act or a reperformance, it's a constant act. And to me, I say a constant act comes from the word of speaking and a duty to speak and to constantly reperform that act. And it comes by using your peh, to say, to speak, to fulfill God's commandments. And I view it as a way to inspire myself that sometimes when I'm speaking, and I'll be speaking today to Senator Menendez and this week through AIPAC, and sometimes it's very scary. You get in front of people that don't necessarily hold your views and opinions, but we have an obligation to do so.
That's great. Thanks, Gail. You know what? You actually froze up for a second.
Oh, sorry.
What was your number two? You had the Chacham, right?
The first one was
Halach Ma'anya?
in Halach Ma'anya the Chacham, and then in Rabbi Gamliel, when he talks about the three attributes to complete the Seder, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. And for that Pesach, you can't just consume it yourself. It's an obligation that you must include other people in your consumption as part of the chok. You have to fulfill it as a group. So again, inviting other people or being inclusive. And then the last time is in Nirtzah, when we just go through what is, you're finished with it. And it's not merely an act, it's defined as a reperformance of that act, constantly fulfilling it. Well, it's not constantly fulfilling it unless you're speaking to do so.
I love that. That's a beautiful idea. That's really phenomenal. And would you say that, I mean, you mentioned to me last week that you're sort of training or learning how to become a second generation speaker. You think this plays into that?
Well, I think that as I lost my father and then I lost my mother-in-law, the two people that I learned about the Holocaust from in very different ways, I don't have a witness anymore. So that's why I felt I had to travel to Poland to at least make myself an eyewitness. But now the obligation doesn't end with becoming a witness. It is, you have a duty to then share that with other people as we get more and more Holocaust deniers. And so, yeah, I think we have an obligation to speak, and it's a scary obligation. And sometimes I have a hard enough time speaking to my own children, let alone strangers, and explaining things that are hoax that have no explanation. How do you explain to an intellectual child to do something when I can't really give them anything to hold on to? So it's a constant thing that we have to do. It's an obstacle, but it's a huge privilege. So I view it as we've been privileged to have that freedom.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. That's really great. And again, I got to thank everybody for really stepping up. I know it's for a lot of people, it's out of your comfort zone to speak even though we're not even in the same room, but to speak publicly is it's the number one public fear that people have. Every week it drives, I get so nervous. The occupational hazard, I guess. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Go for it, Rachel.
Okay, so I'm going to read something from Rabbi Sachs. And this is about the 4 children. So just as a recap, we have 1 is wise, 1 is wicked, 1 is simple, and 1 does not know how to ask. So what he says, or one of his explanations, is the 4 children are a vignette of the Jewish people. One asks because he wants to hear the answer. A second asks because he does not want to hear the answer. A third asks because he does not understand. And the fourth does not ask because he doesn't understand that he doesn't understand. That's me. Ours has never been a monolithic people. Yet there is a message of hope in this family portrait. Though they disagree, they sit around the same table telling the same story. Though they differ, they stay together. They are part of a single family. Even the rebel is there, although part of him does not want to be. This too is who we are. This is the part that I love. The Jewish people is an extended family. We argue, we differ. There are times when we are deeply divided. Yet we are part of the same story. We share the same memories. At difficult times, we can count on one another. We feel one another's pain. Out of this multiplicity of voices comes something none of us could achieve alone. Sitting next to the wise child, the rebel is not fated to remain a rebel. Sitting next to the rebel, the wise child may share his wisdom rather than keep it to himself. The one who cannot ask will in time learn how. The simple child will learn complexity. The wise child will learn simplicity. Each draws strength from the others as we draw strength from belonging to a people.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
In Rabbi Sachs's Haggadah, there are so many gems. And when I was reading through it again this year, I was just filled with such sadness that the world is now deprived of his genius. So I'll show you about my presentation in a minute. So who's up next?
This was page 18 for anyone who wants to reference it.
Now, by the way, I gave Miriam Schwartz, Miriam with a Y. I gave her, she doesn't know how to spell her own name. I gave her a pass because she had finals the last 2 weeks. But since she's the youngest here, I thought maybe she should ask the 4 questions. But now she's like, but I won't do that, because it might lead to dancing. Okay. But okay, who's up next? Who wants to?
I'm happy
Okay,
to
go ahead.
go. Oh, go ahead. You
All
sure,
right,
Nancy? Okay. I'm a big fan of Chabad. I actually follow them on Facebook. So every week I get little stories and little Divrei Torah. And this one is beautiful. So after the splitting of the sea, Miriam led the women in song and dance. This is the only instance in the Torah where women sang. Why? The Talmud tells us that the Jews were redeemed from Egypt in the merit of righteous women. Men had lost hope, but women continued to have children. The Midrash says that these women were so righteous and confident in God's miracles that they took musical instruments with them when they left Egypt. Chazal teach us that just as the redemption from Egypt was in the merit of righteous women, so too will our final redemption be in the merit of righteous women.
Love it.
Love it. Love it.
I wanted
Shelley to be here for that because we've been learning together for so long, and I'm glad Shelley's here for that one.
And I'll add to that, if you have Rabbi Sachs's Haggadah on page 93 in the essays, he has a chapter called Women and the Exodus. And I actually based a Shabbos Haggadah drasha on that about 6 years ago. I'm sure everybody remembers clearly. And also this year, the Shabbos Haggadah drasha is not going to be on Shabbos because Erev Shabbos is Erev Pesach. So we're davening at 7 o'clock in the morning and nobody wants to hear that then. And this Shabbos we have a bar mitzvah. So I don't think it would be appropriate to give a Shabbos Haggadah drasha at a bar mitzvah. Okay, thank you for listening. Now, if you just sit down for another hour, we'll be right out of here. So I'm going to do it a week from tonight on Zoom. And the topic is actually going to be based on Miriam and her dancing. What was she really dancing about? So thank you for that segue. Okay, Nancy.
Can you send us the link to that?
I absolutely will.
Good. Okay.
I will. You can watch live.
Good.
As it's whatever. Okay, Nancy.
Okay, so unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, and I'm just not really a very learned person. I did not go to yeshiva. So this is way beyond my comfort zone. I was reading in the Haggadah from Rabbi Cook, Rabbi Soloveitchik and Rabbi Korlbach, teaching stories and questions about the Haggadah, the night that unites. And it talks about telling the Exodus story each and every day of our lives. Yetziat Mitzrayim is in Dvarim 16:3. It says that you should be telling that every day, talking about it every day, remembering it every day. And so even though we have Passover and we have 2 Seders, maybe we should only have 1, but we have 2 Seders every year. And so that's I'm sorry, my phone just rang.
It's not the plumber.
What?
The plumber again, I hope.
Yeah, no. Besides telling it on Pesach at the Seders, we remember, we say it every day in the Shemona Esrei. In a theme that Rabbi Soloveitchik emphasized in his teachings about Passover, he taught that the experience of Egypt inculcated compassion with the consciousness of every Jew. We are known as the children of the compassionate one. As a people, we have learned a level of mercy and sensitivity that goes above and beyond. In the words of Rabbi Soloveitchik, compassion or Rahmanut is at the core of a world outlook in which the person who is compassionate and caring cannot behave otherwise. Moreover, he says, being merciful, sensitive, and kind-hearted is the essence of Jewish living. This is the reason for our needing a daily reminder of our people's experience in Egypt. The Rav says that we are not allowed to forget our obligation to be compassionate for even a moment, and it is vital that we must recall it daily. That is why we have the daily mitzvah that we should remember our own experience in Egypt and strive to live each day with empathy and sensitivity toward those who are less fortunate and powerless. Not only do you say it in the Shemona Esrei, you also say the song at the sea every day, right? And we also say it in Birkat HaMazon. We reference Yetziat Mitzrayim. That's it.
So Nancy, I'll have to disagree with you vehemently that you say you don't know anything. I don't believe you. That was fantastic. By the way, the Haggadah that she referenced is in my top 5. Rabbi Aaron Goldschneider. It's called "The Night That Unites," and it's Torah.
I use that one as well.
Yeah, Rav Soloveitchik. It's an interesting combination, Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Kook, and Shlomo Carlebach. So, but and also great stories. I've used it many times over the past. Okay, so now somebody has to sort of kind of like bring it all home. So I'm going to ask. I hope everybody knows Miriam Dessau. Miriam, who's our, like I said, she's the Rosh Hashiva of NCSY here in Metro West, and she spends her whole day educating and teaching, both through the written word, but also more importantly by example. And she has inspired so many teens in our area, in our region, and she does a phenomenal job day in, day out. We're happy that she is able to take the time out to study with us every week. So Miriam is going to bring it home for us. How's that?
All right. That was, wow, that was a lot. Okay, so I'll be honest with you, I didn't prepare because I thought this was next week, but since I do educate teens a lot and we talk about Passover, I've been doing it for the past 2 weeks, Pesach, so I'm in the mindset and I had something prepared. So I'm going to share something obviously from the NCSY Haggadah. This is not just a plug for my organization. I bought this with my own money because I was just so excited to have one. I love Haggadahs that have pictures just to keep myself entertained during the Seder. 2, by each thing, it's called the Just One Haggadah. And there's just such short, sweet, easy, and enjoyable ideas that are shared by every portion of the Seder. So I'm going to share with you guys the idea that is shared right before we start Magid. And I was thinking in the car, as I forgot about this, I was thinking, what can I say? And I was kind of processing how Pesach is a very interesting holiday that I feel like more Jews from across all boards tend to celebrate, and it's very important to them. And I was trying to figure out why. What is it about Pesach that's so significant? And I think it's the idea that's shared right before Magid in this Haggadah. And there's a New York Times article that is shared called The Stories That Bind Us. And it basically is just discussing how the thing that really keeps us together and keeps a family together is those stories that you share with each other, knowing your family history. And I think for my family, something that came to my mind that's very like significant to me is it's the little traditions, it's the weird things you do as a family, I think, that keep you guys closer and closer together, that when you move on to the next stage in your life, it's what binds you, and your children are going to think of that as well. So I think something for me that I think of that I've already taken to my home is my father used to he sang Maya Dido at the Friday night table, and now at my Friday night table we sing it, and with like the cute little the girls pipe in during the song and just making it exciting for everyone. And those are those things that I already see myself taking into my own family, keeping the traditions that my father taught me as well. So it's about creating those moments at your Seder, at your family table, whatever it is that you do, taking those moments and building them so strong. So when your children move on to their next stage in life, those family traditions are staying with them forever. So I think that's where it starts at Pesach, when all families tend to join together and try to share your story and share your traditions, so that, when they move on to their next stage of life, they have something to share as well with their kids, and we could keep the story going of the Jewish people.
Amazing. By the way, and what better message to give to teens, especially those who are not necessarily affiliated and they're on their way to affiliation. I think that's the article reference from Bruce Feiler, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You tell the arc of the story of the family history. We came from here, we did well, we did poorly, we recovered, this and that. Really, really important. Wow. Yasher koach, everybody. That's really, really phenomenal. What I want to do now, I don't want to be left out. I want to do it so that Miriam Schwartz feels left out, but I'm just kidding. Relax. I'm going to share my screen, and I say, so tonight we have, I'm doing, every year I do our men's club event. And I'm actually just also experimenting with something I'm doing on my screen. But this is so. By the way, just look at the handout here. You see, this is not even complete, but this is out of 59 pages. It's going to be an over 60-page handout tonight. And what I did this year, just going to move this over here a little. What I did this year is we lost a lot this year. But we lost, I'm taking from the Haggadahs of 6 great Torah luminaries that were lost this year. So you have Rav David Feinstein, Rabbi Norman Lamb, the Novominsker Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov Perlau, Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Steinsaltz, and Rabbi Dr. So, and I'm going to share from each one of them certain snippets. Which there's a lot. And again, the idea behind the men's club Seder is to let people have tools that they can use at their own Sedarim. So I want to just pick out a couple of highlights. Since we mentioned the 4 sons, I'll go. One of my favorites is from Rabbi Norman Lamb. And forgive me for the scrolling, but here it's called the Royal Table, which is also phenomenal Haggadah. And the one that he says about after the 4 sons, you can see how mine are knocked up here. When it says that after it says that they were, before we get to the song, they were up saying Kriya Shema all night until they came and said, Higia Kriya Shema Shel Shachris. That's what they were up studying the Haggadah. Now you have to get up. It's time for Shachris. It's a funny exchange in the Haggadah. So he quotes from Nachman of Breslov. How you spell Breslov is up to debate. It's Breslov, Bratslav, like bratwurst. Okay. He says the word Shachris contains the initial letters of the 4 sons. Shin, Yud, right? So Shin is She'eni Yodei Elishal. The Chet of Shacharit is Chacham. The Reish is Rasha, and the Tav is Tam. When the dawn of redemption comes and all the world will recite Shema with new fervor and devotion, all 4 sons will contribute to it and in turn find themselves redeemed in new appreciation of the tradition of Rabboseinu, our teacher. In this new age, each child, represented in part in each of us, will look to the tradition of Israel for teaching and instruction, recognizing the giants of the past as Rabboteinu, our teachers, and acknowledge as well that our task is now to become Rabboseinu of the future. The notion that everybody has a place And that's why we say, oh, you're here, you're not here, Shacharit, we have all the different types together. And that's when Kriya Shema, in other words, that's when is redemption going to happen? When we are all together, we recognize that not everybody has the same background, not everybody has the same capabilities, not everybody has the same outlook, but there is an arena in which we can all agree. So I think, by the way, just look at this, the assembly that we have this morning, everybody comes from a different place. But what binds us together is Pesach, the tradition, and most importantly, the Torah. So this is one of my favorites from Rabbi Lammy. This over the years, it's a long one from that he says on the Tom, but I want to go to a Rabbi Sachs one. I think I have the one maybe that Rachel quoted. It might even be here. It's a lot of pages. You can get dizzy reading this, right? Bum, 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 bum.
Are you going to send it out to people besides the men's club?
I could secretly do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm going to send out the recording of the event.
Oh, good.
I hope.
No, but just even the
Yeah. No, I'll have a There'll be a link to the all the copyright infringements here.
You won't tell.
Okay, so here this is, and there's a lot from a lot here. So I've now, by the way, I'm not going through this entire thing with the group tonight because they'll hang
You'll
up.
lose them.
No, but we're giving out food and drinks. So, we normally do this live and we can't do it live this year. So, okay, this is Rabbi Sachs Haggadah. And this is one of my favorite things right here. Pesach in the home. It's no coincidence that this, the oldest of Jewish rituals, takes place as it did in Egypt in the home. Judaism attaches immense significance to the family. Genesis is entirely devoted to family. Adam, Chava, Noach, Avraham, Sarah, etc., and their children. The family is the birthplace of a free society. It's where we learn the reciprocity on which the moral life depends. It's where, sharing our vulnerabilities, we discover strength. Through the bonds it creates, we learn chesed, the duty that flows from love. Above all, it's where we learn who we are, where we came from, what our story is. Like going back to what Miriam just said. Significantly, in the only place where the Torah explains why Avraham was chosen to carry the promise of the covenant, the reason is given in terms of parenthood. For I have chosen him so that he will instruct his children and his household after him, and they may keep the way of the Lord, doing what is right and just. Avraham was chosen in order to be a parent. He was also chosen to be an educator. The two concepts, so different in many societies, including our own, are in Judaism inseparable. Fatherhood and motherhood are two distinct phenomena, and Judaism attaches equal importance to both. A child derives biological identity as part of the Jewish people from its mother. The Hebrew word for compassion, rachamim, derives from rechem, which means womb. A mother, more than a father, is bound to a child through unconditional love. Fatherhood, by contrast, is a social construct. It belongs to culture rather than nature. There are animals, including primates, genetically close to human beings, in which fathers do not even recognize their children after a few months. By the way, they're like that in society as well. Fatherhood, like fidelity, is not a constant across cultures. The supreme challenge of any civilization, said the anthropologist Margaret Mead, is to socialize males and persuade them to invest their energies in the home, the family, and children. This is one of Judaism's greatest achievements through the ages. The Hebrew word for male, zachar, is closely related to the word for memory, which is zachor. It's the task of the fathers to hand on to their children the memories of the past. For we are related to the past, not just biologically, but also culturally, through the stories we tell and the history we relate. That's what we do on Pesach. Thus, Pesach, the festival of Jewish memory, is celebrated in the home, the birthplace of memory. Families are a source of immense strength, but they can also be a source of narrowness, nepotism, and indifference to the world outside. So if you say this at your table, this is when everybody starts to pretend they have something else to look at, and they're snickering. They're like, oh, what? There is a potential conflict between the family and the wider concerns that are needed to build a society of justice and compassion. For that reason, a Jewish home must always be open to the hungry, the lonely, and visitors. Avraham and Sarah waiting at their tent to provide food and shelter to passersby are an enduring symbol of this Jewish value. Greater is hospitality, said the sages, than welcoming the divine presence. The Hebrew letter beis, which means house or bayit, is open at one side to show that a Jewish house must always be open to the needy. Thus, the Seder night begins with an invitation, let all who are hungry come and eat. In fact, in all ages, Jews celebrating Pesach sought guests long before the meal began. The invitation at this point is simply to remind us that a free society only exists where families share their warmth with others. I mean, that's just, like, if you just start off your Seder with that, I mean, you've already won. That's my take on it. So, and he has a lot of beautiful things. Let me pull up one nice thing from Rabbi Twersky. Rabbi Twersky's Haggadah is just phenomenal. Again, I'm sorry to make you dizzy with the scrolling here. It's Rabbi Steinsaltz is like typical Rabbi Steinsaltz, very technical. Like the root word of maror is meridius from the Greek Latin meaning spoiled. Yeah. Okay. So Rabbi Twersky, of course, wrote dozens and dozens and dozens of books. He had just the week before he died, he had submitted to publish his 90th book. It was his 90th birthday, and he submitted his 90th book, which is just like unbelievable. And of course, a lot of his writings, especially here in Haggadah, deal with those who struggle with addiction. And he spent his whole life counseling those with addiction, and he was a master in the field. Yeah, so look what it says. I'm just going to move everybody on top here. Hold on. Okay. Meaning of the Exodus. Remember this day in which you departed from Egypt, from the house of bondage with a strong hand. God removed you from there. This is perfectly understandable. The day that a nation was liberated certainly deserves to be commemorated and perpetuated for generations. The United States celebrates its Independence Day and 4th of July with parades, firecrackers, patriotic speeches, and picnics, and also go buy a mattress or a car. Okay, but wait, matzah should be eaten through a 7-day period, 8 in the diaspora, and you can't eat chametz. Isn't it a bit much for an Independence Day celebration, given all the laws and practices that have been derived of the rigid restrictions against chametz, culminating in weeks of preparation and cleaning one home to a point of virtual surgical sterility? Isn't this an overkill for a commemorative event? There is yet more. Not only is Pesach designated a commemoration of the Exodus from Egypt, but also Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and each week on Shabbos, we say, right? That's what Nancy just said. We're saying it all the time, right? Zeich L'Tzias Mitzrayim. So, like, what's going on? Each week? No, every day. And the tefillin shall be for you as a sign on your arm, reminder between your eyes that a strong hand God removed you from Egypt. The talis, so they should be fringes. I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt. Okay? This seems to be getting a bit out of hand for an Independence Day, right? But we're not yet finished. The mitzvah of redemption of the firstborn is meant to commemorate the Exodus, as is giving a bonus to an indentured servant when his term of servitude is completed, the judging of a false prophet, seduced to idolatry, maintenance of idolatry, on and on and on and on. Even the most ardent nationalists would not prescribe such a broad, varied, and taxing practices, both active and restrictive, merely to celebrate the historic event of a nation's coming to being. Clearly, the Exodus from Egypt must represent something other than national independence. That the Exodus from Egypt is inextricably bound to the revelation at Sinai is evident in the message transmission to Moshe at the burning bush. When you bring forth the people from Egypt, you'll serve God on this mountain. And the opening words of the 10 Commandments given at Sinai were at Mount Sinai, I am the Lord your God that's taking you out of Egypt. The liberation from Egypt was thus not merely a nationalistic incident, but the creation of a nation with a universal mission. You have seen that which I have done to Egypt. I brought you unto me, and you'll be a kingdom of priests, mamlechas kohanim v'goy kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The entire nation was to be priestly, and each individual a holy person. This was far more than just the formation of another political entity. The full-scale saga of Egypt, the bondage as well as the liberation, must therefore be understood as components of an ultimate purpose, the formation of a spiritual people. Every incident in the saga can serve as a prototype for the development of spirituality and the teachings that can be derived from each event that have their application in our strivings towards spirituality thousands of years later. From the torture of enslavement, the purifying furnace, the Kur HaBarzal, I call it, to the miraculous dividing of the sea, everything we do and everything that is done to us is a guide towards spirituality. This is the important part. The mission of the Jew today is no different than that of his ancestors who left Egypt, to become priestly and sacred, or in other words, spiritual. Inasmuch as the forces that deter one from spirituality are powerful, ubiquitous, and constant, so must our efforts to vanquish these forces be constantly renewed and reinforced. It's for this reason that we continually refer back to the Exodus as the source and wellspring of our end, I don't know what that word is, in the struggle to achieve spirituality. The more thoroughly we understand the Exodus, the greater will be our resources to achieve spirituality. This is the function of the Haggadah, which is much more than a historical account. Let us therefore study the Haggadah with the realization that it contains teachings of the Exodus that are applicable not only on Pesach, but every day of the year, and indeed many times a day. The ways in which we can attain the true freedom of spirituality. That's just, again, a snippet of Rabbi Twersky, who's really phenomenal. I highly recommend it. So again, I'll send it out to everybody. Don't worry. I will not, unless you say, I feel bad depriving the world of your. I'm going to stop recording this now. Hold on.